Hello and welcome to Misaal. My name is Zahed and I'm your host. On this podcast, I talk candidly with the most innovative minds working towards building a better startup economy in Pakistan. This week's episode of the Misaal podcast features my conversation with Adam Dawood. He's the founder and CEO of bSecure, a one-click checkout solution for e-commerce businesses in Pakistan. In our conversation, we touch upon how bSecure effectively addresses the payment needs of Pakistani e-commerce businesses, the many challenges and opportunities in the e-commerce space, and the macro-level landscape of the Pakistani e-commerce market. Let's listen in. Welcome to the Misaal podcast, Adam. How are you?
I'm very well, Zahid. Thank you so much for having me.
The last time I think we spoke was back in 2014. I think I contacted you about investing in Pakistani startups. You are one of the reasons that I am doing what I'm doing with TechShaw. Is because I was inspired by the article that you wrote about the Pakistani startups back then, when absolutely no one was looking at it.
That's very kind of you to say.
So I wanted to, of course, have you on so that we can talk about bSecure. So why don't you tell me something about bSecure, what you have been up to, and why you are building bSecure.
bSecure is a one-click checkout and payment system which helps local e-commerce builders basically make their e-commerce journey as smooth as possible. So, I've been in the e-commerce industry since 2012 when we started Daraz. And it is so from Daraz, I started one of my own e-commerce companies with my wife called petpeople.pk. I then joined kemu.pk, and from there I went to yevo.com. And I can tell you, I never during that time had an easy experience with sort of payment gateways or even the checkout as well. It was always sort of something that was very tough and never sort of very conversion centric as well. And even at Yevo, where, we had complete control over our tech stack, focusing on the checkout is something we did right at the very beginning. But then, investing time and resources was always very, very difficult because there were so many other fires to put out as well, from sort of our seller platform to our warehousing platform and everything like that. So bSecure was basically came about because I wanted to try and fix those problems for as many e-commerce merchants as possible. And this was around the time the idea also came around because Bolt and Fast was sort of really starting to hype up at this stage. This was late 2019 that I had this sort of idea. And so in February, March 2020, we started building it. And the goal was, okay, how can we sort of look at the one-click checkout model, but really optimize it for Pakistan? Because one of the things I've sort of really learned over time is you can't just sort of copy paste something from the US or European market. You have to sort of optimize for Pakistan as well. And that's what we've been trying to do over the last sort of few years as well. So it was basically built out of that to try and make the entire checkout and payment system as simple as possible for as many builders or merchants in Pakistan.
From what I understand is bSecure is basically like a one-click checkout plugin, right? Like it works for WooCommerce or Shopify, etc. So was there nothing in the market before you started this, or were there other products, but they were not as good?
So when we started in February, March 2020, at that time, there was no sort of one-click checkouts. I'm sure a few people had ideas of doing it then, but when we began, at least when we even did our beta launch, there was nothing in the market. And actually part of the problem was in Pakistan, the payment systems of the payment gateways at that time were so difficult for an e-commerce merchant to manage. Like some of the largest banks didn't even have a WooCommerce or Magento gateway. And Shopify was even much harder to get because Shopify generally makes it harder to basically set up a gateway anyway. So, for a lot of people initially just thought we were a good idea because if we even created the plugins for all of these platforms, that itself would be a major boom for the market.
So now that you have this solution, what's the adoption been like?
It's actually been very, very good. So the first few months, so even the first year was very tough because you see, when you're building out a checkout, it's not as simple as building a payment gateway, because a payment gateway is, to put it very simply, there's a lot of security elements to it, but it's very simply take payment details and then send a success or failure message. Whereas with a checkout, it can get much more complex because a checkout is you're taking the person's sort of key information. So your phone numbers, email address, then you're looking for the delivery address, shipping address, and so forth. Then if you want to do any discounting, so voucher discounts, bin code discounts, or any of those elements, that has to be built in as well. And then finally the payment integration. So there's a lot more components to it, and every platform, so whether it's WooCommerce, Shopify, Magento, it's sort of built very differently. And there's so many different requirements from merchants or builders, as we call them as well. Some of them want a certain feature which is sort of completely unique to them, but it's mandatory. Some of them really want to focus on abandoned carts. So, there was a lot of feature building, and this is something that took us a little bit of time to sort of get right. And even at the beginning, one of the difficult things was we actually had to rebuild our entire platform about 4 or 5 months after our first sort of beta launch as well, because we realized there was a lot of sort of little bugs coming in because of the way we set it up. So, building a checkout is difficult because it is one of the core components of your e-commerce website. So it was something we knew early on that, it was going to take a little bit of time. And we've sort of luckily gone through that. And now we're at the stage where most builders who come in, about easily 95% of them, we can manage all their sort of feature requirements.
If you don't mind sharing the numbers, what do the numbers look like? How many websites currently are using bSecure?
In the last month, we had about 250 active builders, and we're getting in just shy of 1,000 gross orders a day. And we now have over 100,000 customers who have actually transacted through the platform.
I know publicly you have not raised any money, but is this something that you're going to do in the future?
We actually raised money before we even got started. So we are part of the Z2C group. Okay. It's a sort of a media advertising group that really wanted to push forward into the technology space. And I sort of came in and gave them the idea for bSecure and the overall one-click checkout and so on. So it's part of our sort of e-commerce remit that we're building over there. They've also invested in companies such as Vali as well. So we our first sort of round was raised through them, and we're sort of considering how to take this forward in the future.
When it comes to, building a product as complex as a checkout, right? I'm pretty sure you faced certain problems at certain stages. So what were some of the challenges that you faced?
So to be honest, from the very beginning, we've had so many challenges. So like the very first gateway we were integrating, so as soon as we sort of wrote the first line of code, I started reaching out to all the gateways, the members I knew at the gateways, and just getting any one of them to sort of agree and make them explain our business model was sort of very tough. When we had just signed a contract with our first gateway, a few months after that, they were basically asked by the State Bank to sort of stop giving their gateway services to other merchants as well. So, there was a sort of major delay over there, and we had to sort of rejig everything again. So there was a lot. So basically, imagine all the challenges that a normal e-commerce merchant has onboarding a payment gateway. It was sort of maybe 5 to 10 times more difficult for us because, we had to do the explanation as to, we're not actually taking the money from any of our builders. We're actually we're in a way, we are sort of a affiliate partner for you, a sales development team for you. We're going to help you bring on board more merchants and things like that. So, it was a very sort of tough sell. And then we also had this sort of we had this desire to make sure our checkout was phenomenal in terms of the customer journey. So then getting access to the right APIs and everything was very, very difficult. And honestly, I'll tell you, like the first sort of 6-7 months we were operating, our checkout journey was not amazing. It was not. It was very difficult. It was very cumbersome. And it was because we weren't getting access to the APIs that we wanted. So that was on one side. On the other side, when you're then integrating with builders from WooCommerce to Shopify and everything like that, each platform is so sort of unique, and you have to try and sort of make everything meld together in our sort of platform. It was something that took a lot of time for us to figure out. And as I mentioned just slightly earlier as well, after about 4 or 5 months, we had to redo our entire WooCommerce plugin. We had to rewrite everything from scratch because we realized the way we were sort of pulling in the data and sort of pushing it into our platform and so on was not the most optimal way. Our builders were facing issues. So we had to redo all of it.
Are you a technical person, or do you have someone who takes care of all the technical things? Are you like working with a team in-house, outsourced?
I'm not technical per se. So I would say I'm very product driven. So I try and understand the product. I try and understand what the requirements are, and I put those sort of down. So before, one of the first things I even did was sort of wireframe out the entire checkout, wireframed out the sort of merchant, the builder portal and everything like that, and figured out, what are the key features I needed and build out the roadmap from, the minimum requirements for the MVP and then sort of every stage after that. So I'm more of the product guy. On our technical side, so we actually, at the beginning, we were looking to outsource because I didn't want to bring in a CTO right at the very beginning. I felt that, given I know a lot of what the product needs, I needed someone who could take the idea I had and sort of build it out. And so we approached a lot of software houses, and the software house we sort of locked in was Next Generation Innovations, which was run by Farzal Dochi. And they are in effect a boutique software house. And what I love about it is the entire team, in effect, that's been sort of hired for me, they work for bSecure and bSecure only. They are in effect an extension of the bSecure team, except Farzal and sort of one or two of the senior sort of members act as like the CTO and the senior sort of architects and guide the entire team on how to do it, how to build the product. So while we were building out the product specs and the requirements, their team basically builds it out. And the team that we have over there, they really deeply understand our platform as well, which is very critical for us.
How do you envision a future? So since you are a product person, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of ideas. So how do you see yourself building those ideas the way things are going? What do you expect what the product would be doing in the future?
So we're at this amazing stage now where while the core product is built, what's happening now is we're getting a lot of sort of feedback from our builders and our business development team as to, what is required by people in the market. So it's to the point where, now even a lot of what we're building aren't even directly ideas from myself or my product team. It's coming directly from the market. And we then sort of the product team sort of scopes them out. We then look at, what are the most critical ones to sort of focus on, which might have the biggest ROI impact for us as well, and who's even potentially asking for it. And then based on that, we basically prepare the requirements and start building it out in one of the sprints we're doing.
In general, how do you feel about e-commerce the market is going to look like? How do you plan on navigating that?
When I look at the e-commerce market even today, it's still very, very small. I mean, so there are sort of discussions around the actual market size. If you take the state bank numbers and prepayment numbers and put a 90% COD cap on it, which I don't fully agree with right now, you get to a market size of roughly $4 billion in Pakistan. If you put that 90% down to 80%, it's roughly 2 billion. So we can say that anywhere between 2 to 4 billion is the e-commerce market size. As a percentage of the total retail market, that is maybe in the 1 to 2%, again, depending on the kind of numbers you're really looking at. Now, the average e-commerce penetration ratio or e-commerce market size to retail market is pre-pandemic, it was roughly 10 to 12%. Post-pandemic, it's probably going to be in the 15% plus range. I mean, we've all seen those articles where China at a certain point was 50% plus and so on. So I would say just because our numbers are, let's say, in the 1 to 2% range, we're not anywhere even close to the average. So for the next sort of few years, maybe even 10 years, it's going to grow aggressively. And I mean, part of the reports that even you come out with in terms of investments going in, e-commerce and fintech are in effect the largest sort of sectors where investment is coming in. And so I feel it's going to grow. Now, whether Pakistan will end up having a very large e-commerce market size compared to total retail, so something like China, or even the UK or Korea, or whether it'll be lower, so maybe low double digits or so on. This is something we sort of have to figure out. And I think this is where based on the sort of type of economy we are, or our sort of personal shopping habits will come in more than anything else. But all of that will sort of still take place another 5 to 10 years after today. So we still have a long path to grow, and whether we sort of stabilize at 10% or 20% is something we have to look at. But for now, it's still going to go up.
Okay, I mean that's a lot of sabr that you're asking for, but okay.
This is actually one of the biggest challenges. So I've been in Pakistan in the tech sort of industry since 2012. And, the way I look at it, we've gone through like 3 major cycles of sort of funding and growth and so on. And about 4 years ago, I was actually talking to a friend, and he told me something that's sort of very proficient is, you're never too late to do something in Pakistan. So, even now, if you really think about this, like which markets could you not come in and potentially take over? Like some markets will require a little bit more money than others. But let's say if you wanted to make a Daraz or an airlift competitor, if you had $20 to $30 million, you could probably still do it. The only market that's probably not reachable right now is the ride hailing one. So Uber, Careem, especially in the car segment. So there's very few markets that no one has a real stronghold on right now. So, you're not too late. There's still opportunity for anyone to do any business. It's the amount of capital you require will vary.
Would you compare Daraz to Amazon? Because I just feel like there is no comparison between those two, because Amazon is very, it's a very service-oriented, customer-focused, and I don't see that with Daraz. Would you compare those two, or would you say that there is actually no Amazon kind of entity in Pakistan right now?
Based on what you said, service-oriented. So, if we say Amazon, meaning an e-commerce marketplace where 99.9% of the time when you order something, you will get what you want within, say, 24 to 48 hours max. Take a 72 if you're really pushing it. Yeah, at that time, at this moment in time, that does not exist. But having said that, I will give Daraz a few props as well, because having been in Daraz and then having run Kemu and then Yevo, which was a direct competitor to Daraz, it is very, very tough. So if you look at it from Daraz's point of view or any large marketplace's point of view, everyone wants to deliver every order that comes in. No one's spending money on customer acquisition to then just say, I'm not going to deliver the product to you. I don't actually care about that. I just want to get the customer numbers in. No one's doing that. The problem is on the back end. So a lot of the sellers, they do not themselves have the infrastructure needed to ensure the delivery happens properly, because they themselves don't have the inventory management systems. I mean, one of the examples I always used to give was for when I was a kid, we used to go out Eid shopping in Tariq Road and so on. Whenever you went shopping to any shop, if you saw something you liked, but they didn't have the right size or the right color, the shopkeeper would never say, we don't have it, or I don't remember that at all. What would always happen? जी sir, कोई issue नहीं. जी बाजी कोई issue नहीं. वो बच्चे को बेच के गोदाम से ले आता हूँ, warehouse से ले आता हूँ. And then there's no warehouse, because what I then realized much, much later was, they're actually sending their kids to go to all the other stores to see if anyone else has it and bring it back. So no one wants to lose a sale. Now, if you do that with an e-commerce marketplace, it's not really possible, because you are going to lose that customer. And this is where companies like Daraz and what we try to do at Yevo as well, you have to instruct very strong seller-based policies. So if a seller makes a mistake, which is going to happen, you do something about it. The first mistake, maybe you can forgive, but the second, third, fourth, or the number of mistakes over a certain period of time, you have to then sort of stop that seller from ruining your customers. And you have to have very strong sort of dispute resolution policies and customer service policies in place to ensure when something goes bad, you proactively fix it. And now the problem is, none of that is sexy. It's sexy to make an ad. It's sexy to run a marketing campaign. It's not sexy to make sure your customer service teams picks up the call within 30 seconds of a customer calling, day after day after day after day. You see, so you have to be very process oriented. You have to be very focused on those small numbers which actually matter. Like, for example, how long does it take for a seller to dispatch your order? Like literally to how many hours to how many minutes? None of that is sexy, and this is where you have to focus on the process, because if you want to scale, if you have bad processes, you're just going to fail very fast.
Marketplaces always have this issue, right? Like where my experience with marketplaces, like mostly with eBay, right? eBay in the sense that like I'm buying from someone else. On Amazon, I am not dealing with the individual entity. I am dealing with Amazon. So my order doesn't come to me in a certain time or is defected. I send it back. I get it. I send it back to Amazon. I am only dealing with Amazon. Piche to hai, it's of course, there are people selling the stuff, and Amazon FBA is a big deal.
Amazon initially was a first party retail. They bought the books and sold it themselves. But now, if you look at their financial statements, I'm not going to quote the numbers here because I don't sort of remember them off the top of my head, but a large majority of the sales are from their third party marketplace. So other sellers are selling it. And what's critical is, we all think it's coming from Amazon. Even if we know it's not coming from Amazon, we trust in Amazon to make sure things go right. We know that they will take care of things. And that's very critical. I mean, look at AliExpress. Pakistanis shop a lot at AliExpress. And they know AliExpress isn't selling it themselves. Hell, they're even doing prepayment with AliExpress, because AliExpress obviously doesn't do cash on delivery from China to Pakistan. But we are willing to trust them because we know if something goes wrong, we can complain. That isn't there in any of the Pakistani sort of marketplaces. And that is very critical. And I think a big part of it is doing good customer service is boring, because you have to do the same mundane things day after day after day. You have to optimize the process day after day after day. And if you are not willing to put in the hours and time it takes to do that, you're not going to do very well.
Cash on delivery seems to be a culprit here. So what if, hypothetically speaking, tomorrow, cash on delivery is like, sunset, just doesn't exist. Daraz says, you know what? We'll give you 20% discount, use your card, no cash on delivery. What do you think will happen?
A large part of the market will go away. So after we did the e-commerce awards, this was in early 2021, we did a survey. So we had about 93 unique phone numbers basically vote in the e-commerce awards. And we sent all of those unique phone numbers an SMS asking them to complete a survey. Roughly 15,000 people completed that survey. So these are generally people who've obviously done some kind of e-commerce shopping, or for the most part. I think it was 63 to 70% of people said they used cash on delivery as their primary means of payment. And they basically, and the major reason they use cash on delivery, 50% of it was because they don't trust some element. Some people don't trust the online payment gateway. Some people don't trust the seller. Some people don't trust the logistics companies, or they know someone, or they themselves have had a bad experience paying online. So that was roughly 50% of the people who said that's why they choose it. But then we asked them a third question as well. We asked them, if you were to shop at an e-commerce company 5 times, and in those sort of 5 times, the order was delivered to you perfectly and within 2 or 3 days, how many of you would then use prepayment for your next order? And I think about 60% of people said they would prefer prepayment. And this is something I noticed myself at Yevo, because what we did, one of the exercises we did, because our prepayments were growing very rapidly in 2018 or so, we then I asked my team to do an exercise, take a cohort of customers over 6 to 9 months, filter out all the customers who basically had a complaint. So whether it be refund or anything, any sort of complaint, filter them out. Then look at the customers who had placed their very first order as cash on delivery, and then check by the time they placed their fifth order, how many of them had converted to prepayment. And we found that when we had filtered out all the customers who had never made a complaint or anything, something like 70% of customers by the fifth order had moved into prepayments. Because at the end of the day, it is easy. And so, and we did that exercise because, people always used to say people don't trust prepayments. So we wanted to see, if you ended up trusting a store, would you actually convert? And we found that was true. So the key is, how do you build trust between your customer and yourself, you as an e-commerce marketplace or a e-commerce store or anything like that? So that is very, very critical. And that is something that does not happen quickly. So as long as that can be built, there's a huge undertaking that the market can have.
If you think about it, then what's the population that has like a debit card or credit card? It's not that high, I'm pretty sure. It has to be very low.
So again, there's a lot of duplicates in this, but roughly I think it was 20 plus million debit cards. And I think, if I remember correctly, 6 to 8 million credit cards. And again, this is not unique. Unique would probably be in the 10 million range.
That's not that many credit cards. So it's will be difficult to basically, if cash on delivery is like, no longer accepted in Pakistan, like a lot of businesses will just have to shut down because there are not enough credit cards in circulation to keep the orders coming.
You have other payment methods as well, like
Sorry.
Mobile wallets such as Jazz Cash, Easy Pesa. Bank transfer seems to be doing a little bit better. And I think Rast will be coming out with their P2M or peer to merchant payment system maybe anytime in the next year or so. So I think there is sort of opportunity. But again, when the customer has a choice between prepayment of any kind and cash on delivery, if they do not trust the e-commerce store, they're going to go with the cash on delivery market. And the surprising thing is, cash on delivery, I personally feel, is actually less safe. Because at least I know when I pay with a credit card, if something goes wrong, I can always call up the bank and reverse my charges. Whereas with cash on delivery, if I take the product and the seller is not trustworthy, just getting the money back from the merchant can be a huge headache.
I mean, when you talk about trust, so I feel like if the trust is issued, like if, let's just say tomorrow Amazon comes to Pakistan and starts operation, and Amazon being Amazon, I don't know if they will accept cash on delivery or not, but let's just say they don't accept cash on delivery. Do you think that is what it's going to take for mass adoption of, like, people? I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people who are qualified for a debit card or qualified for a credit card, but they have never seen the need to apply for one, right? So do you think they would start applying for it, and as a result, there will be a lot more activity? Because at the end of the day, I'm looking at it like big picture, right? Big picture, the more of this economy, all these transactions have a paper trail, the better for Pakistan in general, right? Like, you're talking about taxes, you're talking about a lot of other things that start happening.
That's a very tough question. But so I'll say, if Amazon decided to come in and they said no cash on delivery, I think there would be a huge amount of trust, especially amongst the middle class and above who know of Amazon. So they would be willing to do it. Then accessibility becomes a major question. Now, I think one of the key things Amazon would have to do is bring in those alternative payment methods, Jazz Cash, Easy Pesa, bank transfer, and all of those things. Now, because, see, one of the key problems is, I mean, you've probably seen this a lot on Twitter anyway, na? Opening a bank account is very difficult in Pakistan. Getting a credit card is also a major challenge also. You see, I mean, forget credit card, just getting a debit card is very difficult. And, I would say they would have an element of trust, but it sort of comes back to the financial sector as well. Now, how easy is it to sort of push debit cards and credit cards? It's not very easy to set that up yourself, to open it. The very lucky few who, have the resources, or who the sales manager are always sort of coming to their office and saying, no, we'll do all the paperwork, we'll sign it for you. It's easy for them, but that's, 0.01% of the population. So for everyone else, it's going to be difficult. So this is where Jazz Cash, Easy Paisa makes more sense. However, there is a lot of work happening in this. I mean, look at Zindagi, look at Naya Pay, look at Sada Pay. All of these companies coming in, their processes seem to be much, much simpler, their onboarding process. So there could be major change. And I think one of the key things will be Pakistan, if it's built on cards, it's not going to be built on credit cards. It will end up being built on debit cards.
What would you say is like the e-commerce? Because I know you had the e-commerce awards, right? So you got like a peek into a lot of these companies doing different things and how customers feel about e-commerce in Pakistan. What is like one thing that you feel that should change in the next couple of years for things to get better and better every single year?
The most critical thing is, and we've touched on this already, is we be proactive with your customers. Do the boring things and make sure they scale properly. Making an ad or running ads is fun. Making sure your customer service team answers calls properly, handles the problems immediately. It is generally not fun, or very few people would consider it fun. Now, those are the things that really end up mattering. So as long as, there are small sort of cottage e-commerce companies that do really, really well because they're focused on a very small group of customers, or the founder themselves are in effect doing their customer service themselves, whether it be through WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or anything like that. And that generally makes it successful. But, scaling that, so that's easy to do when you're doing 10, maybe even 100 orders a day, assuming you don't have a very high complaint ratio. But as soon as you start scaling to thousands of orders a day, you have to build a team around it. And then when you build a team, your processes which will determine your success. Your culture is also obviously very critical, but how you process every single thing is critical. Because let's be honest, Amazon, while its culture may be phenomenal as well, if they didn't have the right processes, or the millions of complaints they probably have coming in any given week or month would not be processed very quickly. So it's very critical that you focus on the process.
Customer service when it comes to Amazon, it's just crazy because just like a couple of months ago, I had like 3-4 items delivered to my neighbor. Accidentally, like the person just got confused, the delivery driver. He dropped off the package at my neighbor's house. So when I got home, it said that it was delivered, right? So I didn't see it on my door, and like being the idiot I am, I freaked out. I'm like, okay, I did not get my order. I actually needed whatever was coming in. I needed the product right away. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to call Amazon. I have never called Amazon. I have been shopping on Amazon since 2004 or 5. And I called them. Within 30 seconds, she was like, well, I'll get you the refund. That's it. End of call. She did not waste more time with me. She looked at the fact that I've been a customer for the past 15 years, right? She saw that I'm probably spending $5,000 or $6,000 a year on Amazon. And she didn't want to argue with me. She didn't want to say, hey, can you wait half an hour? Are you a child? Are you a baby? Can you wait? And I should have waited, because that's what happened. A couple of hours later, I got the product. But the fact that within 30 seconds of me telling her that, hey, I didn't get my order and I received this message that was delivered, she didn't argue with me. She just gave me a full refund on 4 different products. It was just 4 different products. So that is very difficult to beat.
Now, let's break down that process a little bit, because I have had a very similar experience with Amazon. So I ordered one of those, swiveling TV stands. And I was delivered a fishing rod, because and I knew just by looking at the packaging, this isn't a TV stand. And for me, it was a little difficult to find their number. But when I got to call them, my refund was processed immediately. But now let's go through the process. So, you get in touch with Amazon, which everyone will do, and people understand issues can happen. There's no problem there. The major thing was the customer service rep. She had all the information in front of her. And not only that, she was empowered to make a decision. That is very critical. Most companies do not empower their frontline staff. Now, this is something that's very critical. Now, there could obviously be certain bans. So, for example, if your order was less than $100, they probably give the frontline staff the ability to do it. If it's above maybe $1,000, they might have to bring in a manager or some sort. It makes sense to do that, but they had empowered their frontline staff. And another key thing, and this is where then the technology comes in. Not only did she have the information, when she pressed that refund button, someone in the back end did not have to go into the payment gateway to also process the refund. That button was connected directly to the payment gateway. You see, so there was no sort of middlemen who were then doing processing, and this is one of the key challenges that's there as well. Because I remember in Pakistan there were like 2 gateways that I had at Yevo, where for a refund to be processed, even if my customer service team had said, okay, process the refund, they had to print out a receipt which I had to sign and physically mail to the office of the payment gateway, and then they would do the refund. And just getting them, and can you imagine if there's a holiday, it's like going to take 5 days for the mail to even reach them. So, getting them to just even agree to the fact that, listen, we will sign it, we will send you a scan, process the refund, and we will give you the airway bill number of the logistics company so you're going to get it. But process the refund before you get the physical copy. Now, what we had always wanted was an API. Here, when I press a button on my platform, I will hit your platform and press the API button, rather than have people on my side and people on your side doing the manual work. So you see, like, it's empowering your frontline staff, but then you need the technology to support you. And the critical thing, you also said, she could see your profile, and she probably didn't even see every order you've done. That would be too much work. Amazon probably gives you a customer score. So if your customer score is above, let's say, the 90% threshold, they don't question it, they'll just refund it. You see? It's that simple. And it takes time. You build algorithms, you then optimize the algorithms. And this is what we did for our sellers as well. At Yevo, we gave a ranking to every seller based on multiple variables. One was how many complaints are customers getting, how quickly are they dispatching, how many times are they. We even had a variable for how many times they log into their portal. Because if they're logging in multiple times a day, then we know they're active. Whereas if they log in every 3 days, we know they're not active, so everything's going to work slowly. So you just set a score, and you see there's so much work to do.
Yeah, so there is a reason, the VCs are funding B2B e-commerce a lot more than the B2C e-commerce, because B2C e-commerce is painful. It is a difficult problem to solve, whereas B2B is not that difficult problem to solve. Like, you can still have the credit terms and all those things. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's not as difficult as B2C.
No, you're completely right. And it makes a lot of sense because there's a major lack of infrastructure in our B2B markets as well. So we're going back to the Tariq Road example where, no store in Tariq Road would, again, I'm talking in the 90s and early 2000s, no store would have an inventory management system. Even so, I'll give you an example from just a few years ago. One of the largest fashion brands in Pakistan, whose name everyone will know, they had some of the most expensive ERP systems. We're talking Microsoft Dynamics, Oracle, SAP type level ERP system. But their ERP system, their warehouse, was not connected to their e-commerce store. So what is the point if you have like a really expensive ERP system for your outlets? You have, let's say, Magento or Shopify running for e-commerce, but you're not syncing the inventory. What is the point? So, even at that level, at the highest level, there were still issues. So at the bottom level, you can imagine how bad it is.
Thank you for that insightful conversation. It was lovely talking to you. Thank you for being on the misaal podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Zahid. I've had a great conversation. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the misaal podcast. I hope you enjoyed the podcast and will thank me by writing a review or sharing it on social media. Make sure you follow and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Thanks again. See you soon.